In a world filled with uncertainty and division, it's easy to feel like your voice doesn't matter. But what if I told you that a few key habits could help you move from powerless to powerful? Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk. And if you're ready to stop waiting for change and start being the change, then today's pep talk is just for you.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Adam Kahane, has work that has addressed many of the most important challenges of our time, including racial oppression, violent conflict among warring groups and countries, insecurity and inequity, drug problems, social unrest, unsustainable food systems, and climate change. In addition to authoring 5 best-selling books, he's the director of Rios Partners, an international social enterprise that helps people move forward together on their most important and difficult issues. His new book is Everyday Habits for Transforming Systems. Happy to have you with us, and welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks, Rob. Happy to be here.
Well, good. And by the way, right before we went on, Adam was giving me some good news about that book. So tell us how the book's doing.
Well, the book came out last week. It's doing fine. But what I find interesting is that it's the number one hot new release in 4 completely different lists: strategy and competition, discrimination and racism, organizational learning, and decision making and problem solving. So it sets out what I think are some pretty fundamental principles, and I hope can be useful to your listeners as well. And by the way, I think the introduction you made is exactly the point. The book is more than anything about how can you, make a difference in the world? How can you have agency? You can try to fit into things the way they are. That's fine. That's what most of us do most of the day. If it's raining, we bring an umbrella. We can't change the rain, but that's not the only way to be. And if you're in a system that you think ought to be different, there's ways to affect it, and that's what the book's about. So I think you hit the nail right on the head with the word agency.
Excellent. And I will tell you that I do believe that, as a guy who writes about change, it is one of the most difficult things. I really like where we're going to be going. And I'm going to give you a teaser, folks. As a trainer, I do teach workshops, but I like the fact that you're a guy who's almost more into implementation. It's like, okay, we can come up with some of these great ideas, but how do we make sure that they actually last, that we create true lasting change? And that's what I'm looking forward to getting into with you. But let me start with this here. I tease this question probably every 4 or 5 shows because I don't really believe we find a book, it finds us. So in that vein, how did this particular book find you?
It's a great question. And my prior book was called Facilitating Breakthrough, and it's about my work, as you say, facilitating implementation of big projects in companies, across companies, with governments, with NGOs, on the topics you mentioned in the introduction. And when it came out, I did 3 interviews like this, 30-minute live interviews with 3 people who I thought has made a big difference in the world as anybody I know. Juan Manuel Santos, who was president of Colombia, who ended the 52-year civil war and got the Nobel Peace Prize. Christiana Figueres, who was the head of the UN climate talks and negotiated the Paris Accords. And a South African politician, an activist and businessman named Trevor Manuel, who was the Minister of Finance here for 15 years. And that Trevor was the first, and I don't know him well, but I've known him for a long time. He's how I got started in this work 30 years ago. And I interviewed him, and I was basically trying to get him to agree with what I said in the book about how you make change. And he was talking about what he actually had done that resulted in him being a major player in the transition from racial apartheid to democracy. And it was a terrible interview.
Hmm.
uh, really bad. I'm not as experienced interviewer as you. And when it ended 30 minutes, I got messages from my colleagues, my wife saying, terrible interviewer, don't quit your day job. So, uh, you know, I was upset but more than anything, I was confused. I was wondering what was I missing here? And one of my good qualities, I have a lot of bad qualities. One of the good ones is when something doesn't go as I expected to, I really try to figure out what what did I think and what was actually the case and what can I learn? And what I realized is my idea about change as a facilitator, as a consultant, as a trainer like you is totally different from what somebody who's literally on the ground uh, trying to change things, in this case, trying to change a country. And that was the impetus for the book. What I realized is that my understanding of how change happens from the outside as a facilitator, trainer, consultant is completely different from what it looks like to somebody like Trevor, who was literally on the ground trying to change the way the system worked. And I thought, okay, there's something I don't understand here that I need to understand and that other people need to understand. And that first interview, that was the first interview of the 30 that created this book. And the seven habits, the seven everyday habits for transforming systems came out of those interviews and was kicked off by that disaster of a conversation with Trevor.
Well, well, and in hindsight, it wasn't quite a disaster. I mean, look where it led you. So,
Yeah.
there's always that rule of thumb that whenever you think you're in a disastrous job or situation, you'd be shocked how many times that thing will circle back and go, wow, I wouldn't have made this client. I wouldn't have found this opportunity if I haven't been knocked around. I came out of Maryland, University of Maryland. I was selling life, health, and disability insurance for the New York Life for 2 years and change. And I remember thinking, how is this contributing to where I want to be? And decades later, I start moving as a professional speaker, and I've got all this Xerox background, and they didn't care. The financial industry said, oh, he was an insurance agent. We'll listen to him. So I thought, there it is, comes back on you.
Yeah.
So it's just odd how that works.
Yeah. Especially if you have the discipline to ask, what's going on here? What am I missing? What do I need to learn? What do I need to do differently?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. We give feedback to others, but we don't give feedback to ourselves. And when we do, it's typically not very balanced. It's usually this is what I didn't like. I did. But sure, it'd be nice if we took our own notes and said, with an individual, I try and find some things I like, some things I'd suggest, because a lot of times people don't know what they're doing well. So we want to do that and keep it balanced. We don't do that instinctively for ourselves. I wish we did. I want to show you something, folks. It's a podcast, so you can't see it, but Adam can. I just want to prove to him. I actually have this saying I keep on my desk. It says, "We weren't put on this earth to make a living. We were put on this earth to make a difference." And I think it
Mm.
speaks to a little bit of what you were speaking about. I just wanted you to know it's one of the reasons as I sort of climbed into you as a guest in your book, I thought, I really think I align with this guy a little bit here because that's very important to me.
Well, it goes back again to this thing you said right at the beginning that, you know, what most of us do most of the time when something doesn't isn't the way we want it to be, we try to figure out who, what are these other people doing that is screwing up?
Yeah.
And yeah, other people are often doing things that aren't good for us, aren't good for the world. But what I've learned over and over is we have to bring our attention back, whether it's a month later or a week later or a minute later, to, okay, yeah, that may all be true, but what can I do? And that's what blew me away when I first came to South Africa 34 years ago, is to meet people, not that much different from us, not smarter or fundamentally different, but who were saying things aren't good and I want to see what I can do to change them. And once you've met people like that, you can never go back.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I really like about what you've got is you've got these seven key habits, but there's simple habits, so you say, uh, to create change. So let's just cherry pick one or two of them. Um, so if you could pick one, I know they're all important. I don't want all seven. I want people buying the book. But if you could pick one or two simple habits, maybe somebody could start today, what would they be?
I got the habits out of talking to other people, and some of them were stuff I'd thought about or I knew pretty well, but some of them really surprised me and so have more energy for me. And the one that was really new to me and that I think is very useful and will be especially useful to your listeners is number four, which is working with cracks and this image of a crack in a system. And the idea is that, most of us, certainly me, are used to thinking that things are just the way they are. The economy is the way it is, our political system's the way it is, our trading system's the way it is, our climate is the way it is. And you just have to figure out how to fit in and do the best you can and have a good life and make a living in that system. And that's not true. And if there's anything the last few weeks have taught us is that these systems were built by people, they can be rebuilt by people. It's quite amazing how quickly things are changing. So if things are not solid and smooth, if you thought things were just solid and smooth, then the only way to change them would be to take a sledgehammer to them or blow them up. And you can do that. There's a lot of that going around. I think it's dangerous. I was saying to somebody the other day, the food system, for example, the system that brings food to our supermarkets, to our doors. It's not perfect. Some people don't have enough. Some people have too much. Some of it's bad quality. Some of it makes you fat. Some of it's not good for the earth. But I wouldn't be happy if somebody just said, it's screwed up. Let me blow the whole thing up. That would not be a good idea, just to take a simple example. So, what's the alternative? The alternative is looking for where there are cracks. Things are always changing. There's things that are problems that people are concerned about. There's things that are going well that people are trying to imitate. Habit number four is working with cracks. And I'm from Montreal, so I'm obliged on every podcast to quote Leonard Cohen, who famously said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And I found this metaphor of working with cracks very productive. And the clearest way I know of saying it is one of my readers said, if you're a rock climber, you don't climb up a smooth boulder. You're all of your attention is where's the crack? Where's the crack I can put my finger in or my toe in? So that habit of looking for in this seemingly permanent, smooth, unchangeable thing, what's cracking? How can I move towards it? How can I go through it? How can I enlarge it? How can I work with it? Where's the opportunity? Where's the thing I can do different to get where I'm trying to go and to make things better?
All right, now I'm gonna pin you down on a process move or two for that because I like it. Because what I'm hearing in my head, and I'm speaking for the sales people that are listening right now, is yeah, but everybody fears change. And one of the most difficult battles a salesperson can have is to walk in, spot a crack, and usually they're in there because the client knows there's a crack. And but they don't necessarily want to do anything about it. Matter of fact, they might know that that crack occurred 5 years ago, but it isn't a big crack. It's just a crack, and we've learned how to handle that crack. Salesperson's job is to try and get somebody to want to create change. Any thoughts on that in terms of I moved, I guess, from a system to an individual on you, but are there process behaviors, things that we could say, well, we know we got to do it. Here are two tips on how to do it.
Yeah. So let me give you an example and let me then give you the process tip.
Okay.
Um, Rios Partners as an organization works with teams of leaders from across the system, whether it's a company or a community or a country, usually from different, sometimes from the same organization, sometimes from different organizations. And what we've been doing for 20 years is getting on airplanes, getting people together in hotels or conference centers and working through the issues. January 2020, COVID hits. The idea of getting on airplanes and getting groups of people together in hotels suddenly goes from being the main way we do things to impossible. And that was a crack. And I'm proud of the fact that, well, it's not just us, but we figured out within days how to change everything to seize that opportunity and deal with that disruption. It was an opportunity, we realized a few weeks later, because now it's much cheaper to deliver the service online. Secondly, people can do it even if they're stuck at home or have family responsibilities. It's easy to do in multiple languages. Zoom is great in interpretation, etc. So this is an example of something's changed. What can I do to meet where it is? Now, the process tip is, and this is actually the big idea in the book. This is my editor says a book has to have one big idea. This is it. So this
Okay.
is the idea over the seven. The seven habits are double clicks on this one
I
big
want to hit a
idea.
drum roll of some sort, but yeah,
Okay,
okay, I'm with
okay,
you.
you can do it. You can do it on your desk. Here, I'll
Blink.
do it.
Okay.
Okay. The big idea of the book is it has to do with the stance you take vis-a-vis the system you're working in, or in your example, vis-a-vis the people you're talking to. And this was actually months later what I realized Trevor Manu was trying to tell me in that disastrous first interview. And when I went back at it, I could see he was doing something that I call in the book radical engagement. Engagement meaning taking part in, pledging oneself to, holding fast, entering into conflict with, and not superficially like I have a dinner engagement, but radically. The root means, the Latin means root, going to the roots, affecting the foundation, essential, fundamental. So what's radical engagement? That's the big move. And I'm certain it's 100% applicable to entrepreneurs and salespeople. It doesn't mean participating in what's going on distractedly, resigned, knowing it all, hierarchically, at arm's length, with arms crossed, superficially, impatiently saying, take it or leave it. What it does mean is taking part in it alertly, with hope and curiosity, horizontally, and here's the physical stance, leaning forward, hands on, digging deep, persisting, and above all, reciprocally and relationally. I'm guessing, I'm not a sales trainer, I'm not a great salesperson, but I'm guessing that great salespeople know how to do that. They know how to approach people leaning forward, saying, how do you think about this? What's going on for you? I wonder what we can figure out here, rather than saying, here's my product, you're going to love it, take it or leave it. So that's the big idea of the book. And I think that's the big idea for entrepreneurs and salespeople.
Yeah, we're going to make a salesman out of you after all, because you've nailed exactly what we believe, which is, and I'm going to shorten it to,
Yeah, please,
the
please.
instinct is to tell somebody, pitch your idea.
Yeah, yeah,
And logic states that we should do just what you said, which is, why don't we let the client paint the picture? Why aren't we asking better questions? And not just, how's the weather in South Africa today, but earning the right to get at some of these more difficult questions. And then, for goodness sakes, once a client gives you the blessing of saying, I've never asked myself, or I've seen that, and that's something that really makes us anxious, still avoiding the temptation to say, here's
yeah,
how we fix it, and say, tell me more. That is,
yeah,
as simple as it is, Adam, that's a hard move for salespeople, entrepreneurs, and people in general to do.
yeah. No, I find it difficult myself. It's so the temptation to be the expert, be the know-it-all, um, tell them what they ought to do. I mean, I've learned the hard way, not just in business, but in family life, that telling people what they ought to do is limited success, I would say.
Right. Even in presentations, think of the old model. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. So there's so much
Yeah.
telling going on. When in reality, um, if we're going to tell anybody something, even in presentation, why don't we tell them what's in it for them to even hear this message,
Yeah.
and how it will help them on the job or personally, and what the big picture is. There's so much more we can do. We've become a society that loves to tell people what to do.
Yeah. Let me come at this from another angle.
Good.
So in my work, the question that people ask me most often is, or the situation they most often describe is, I'm trying to do this thing in the world. I'm trying to get people to do X to solve problem Y. And these people I need, they won't join me because they don't agree with me. What do I do? I've had this question 100 times. And I actually, it's a question that I actually know the answer to, which is that why don't you start by asking them how they see the situation? And and what you'll probably discover is they may also find the situation problematic, but perhaps for a different reason than you, and that's okay. You just have to agree that the situation's not the way it ought to be, and we can do something about it. We don't have to agree on why it's not right or exactly what the problem is or exactly what the solution is. And that's a big surprise to most people. That, oh, geez, I never thought of that. In fact, I'd go further. Solutions that different people support for different reasons are better than solutions that everybody supports for the same reason. Because if the world changes, reason may go ahead. That reason may go away. But if there's a bunch of us getting behind this for different reasons, maybe even contradictory reasons, then the chance that we'll be able to move it ahead is much higher.
Particularly when they're coming up with the idea as well. I think again, we come in and we dictate, even with our
Yeah,
children, our loved ones, and our significant others. When we can make that idea their idea or let them participate in the finding of that idea, that's how we create change, in my opinion. I also think that we learned it, Adam, when we were about 2 years old. And then we forgot it because remember what a 2-year-old does? They run around the house going, "'Cause why?"
right.
We're going to be having dinner. Cause why? Well, this is what they're actually problem solving is what they're doing. I
Yeah.
wish we did a little bit more of cause why with the people that we're trying to help.
Well, and it's not, I also want to say this is not about tricking them into agreeing with me. I mean, maybe they'll agree with me, maybe they won't. But it's coming up with something that makes sense to them, that hopefully also works in some way, maybe differently than I expected, makes sense for me as well.
Yeah. Well,
But it has to make sense for them.
yes. All right. Now let's get on that word tricking them. Okay, because I think a lot of people feel that salespeople almost will manipulate in a certain way.
Yeah.
This is really going to keep you up at night when I tell you my basic definition of selling is taking an idea, put it in somebody else's head, and making them feel like they thought of it. Your tricking a meter must be going off the chart right now. But I do think a lot of times what we have to realize is that we take that fear of change and realize not trying to manipulate you. I'm not doing this for my gain. I'm trying to do this for your gain. There's so many people that so desperately need an individual to help them move from that paralyzing job or relationship. And to do it, we have to create trust, but we also have to ask questions that aren't as comfortable. But I could ask them or wait for this problem to get bigger. Everybody makes change once the problem is bigger. I'm hoping, Adam, we can do this for organizations and individuals before it becomes a big problem. That's my value. That's why I walk this earth. I'm trying to help people before problems get too big. And that's a skill set. But is it tricking them? I don't know. What do does that sound like I'm tricking people?
Well, I don't know. I'm not,
You can say
I,
yes. You won't hurt my
no,
feelings.
no, no, I have my thoughts about this, which I'll share with you, but
Oh, good.
you have your own way of thinking about this, and it's
Hmm.
not my job to try to correct you or tell you
Oh,
how
it
you ought to
is.
think about it.
I
To go back
actually
to
love the
no,
debates on this. Yeah.
I'd say two things.
Yeah.
I had a mentor years ago, a man, wonderful man named Bill O'Brien, very down to earth guy from rural Massachusetts. He didn't earlier in his life been CEO of Hanover Insurance, which was a great company. Now doesn't exist anymore. Anyhow, I met him after he'd retired. And one of the things he taught me, he said, everybody in the world, even the simplest person, knows when you're trying to bullshit them. So I think that I think there's a subtle distinction. There's tricking people to get them to do something that is not right, it's not true, or there's trying to help them. The very first experience I had in this work in 1991 in South Africa, coming into a situation where people had been fighting and violently for decades and uh, facilitating these workshops. One of the guys in the workshop said to me, Adam, when we first met you, we couldn't believe that anybody could be so naive. We were certain you were trying to manipulate us. And then when we realized you actually didn't know anything, we decided to trust you. So it's not that I'm recommending naivete or not knowing anything, but I think what I did right that one time, and I've often not done this right, is this man and those people could tell, he's actually trying to be helpful. We can tell he's trying to be helpful. And I often have that experience. People are just squinting at me for the first hour, day, trying to figure out what's he really on about? Who is he trying to serve here? What's his hidden agenda? And at the moment when they decide, he may be ignorant, he may be clumsy, but he's actually trying to help us, then we can relax and get on with the work. So I think underneath your question is, I am trying to help these people. I think I know something that could help. That's what comes through. That's not tricking.
Right.
That's not tricking.
Yeah.
And what it requires is certain human relationship. Of okay, Rob's a funny guy. I wasn't sure about him, and I don't really agree with him on everything, but I can see he's trying to help me here, and I can see he's a genuine person. And okay, let's see what we can do together. And that has to come first.
Yep. That's the trust part, Adam. And again,
Yeah,
I can't go
yeah,
asking you, I can't go ask you what's not working here, walking in the door with a cup of coffee in my hand. That has to be earned. And so
right.
we're on the same page there. It all begins with
Yeah,
trust. It really
yeah,
does. And one last thing, and I'll move off this. For me, and I think we're talking about the same thing, we're not as far apart as you think. Um, I think there's a key line between manipulation and influence, and the word is intent. What's the
yeah,
intent of the conversation?
yeah.
I wish certain parents, I wish certain people met wouldn't be so afraid of asking tougher questions because they could create change if they learned the process. But let's move from there. But I love that. I
Oh, but
love this
just on this thing
discussion.
about
Yeah,
intent,
yeah.
uh, uh, you know, Bill O'Brien was an outstanding person. Sorry, you can't interview him. He wrote a book before he passed away called Character in the Corporation.
Hmm.
But what the line he's most famous for is he said the most important hour of an engagement is the hour before, where you're clarifying your intent. So I think I hadn't thought of putting it this way, but the way you ask it, I think what Bill believed is I need to clarify my intent because people will be able to read my real intent, however much I want to disguise it. So make sure that's correct and I think helpful, and then I'll be fine.
Good. Good. Makes sense. Makes sense. I wish I could have met this man. I love that quote, by the way. All right. Here's where I was going. I'm a stickler for implementation. I've been delivering workshops for over 40 years. And I recognize the fact that you can teach somebody all you want, you can entertain them, you can inspire them, you can motivate them. But if they don't implement what you've just taught them, well, you got a problem. So I want to tie this into what you've written about long-term change. How can people stay committed? I got the short term. Everybody loves a workshop if the person was entertaining 2 hours afterwards. I'm talking 2 months, 2 years afterwards. So how can you get people to stay committed to long-term change without just burning out on the whole idea of change?
Well, let me say two things about that. I'll
Mhm.
answer your question directly, and then I want to come back to the way you asked the question,
Okay.
um, because I think there's something subtle there. So, habit number 7 in the book is titled Persevering and Resting. And I think it's not exactly what you're talking about, but it's related that if we're trying to do anything important in the world, or useful or lasting or that's going to make a difference, it's not just going to be a matter of a great half hour or a great 3 hours or a great week. Um, it's going to be something that's going to take time. Bill O'Brien, I guess I'm on a Bill O'Brien kick, but he used to say, takes 9 months to make a baby, no matter how many people you put on the job.
That one I won't be quoting, but I like it. Keep going.
No, no, but it's so important that
Yeah.
you can try to do things quickly. Things take the time they take. And
Right.
so anyway, um, so uh, so most of the time, what's required, whether for a career or building a business or fixing something in your community, it takes perseverance. It's going to take more than a few hours, more than a few weeks, more than a few months. And the so you need persevering, but it doesn't work to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. You can't just sprint for a short while. You can't just push on until you burn out. You've also got to rest so you can stay healthy for what is, in one way or another, a long job. And I just know this from my own experience. The times, and there have been many times when I pushed and pushed and pushed myself, my team, um, so that we're all, on the edge of burning out, or burning out is when I've done my worst work.
Hmm.
It's when I'm not alert. It's when I can't relate to people. It's when I'm not picking up cues. It's when I'm not being smart. It's when I'm not being open. So the seventh habit is, yes, persevering, but also resting. And I think that's a surprise in our world of just keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Doesn't work.
Yeah, you're right. Because particularly for entrepreneurs, we want to outwork the guy to the right or left of us, or the person to the right or left. It's an instinct. It's a book I've never written. Maybe you'll write it with me. I've always had the title. And how we land on the title? About 15 years, 20 years on this title. Instinct versus logic. There are so many things that we do instinctively that are just not logical. With the first
Yeah.
one we learned when we were 15, buy low and sell high. Who hasn't heard that one?
Yeah.
Who actually does it? I haven't met him yet, but great. It's a great logic. So I think what you're stating is something again it's logical, but I question the instinct.
Oh, and it's attention. And I've been an entrepreneur my whole the last 35 years of my life. That's how I and my partners built Rio's Partners. And it's hard work, and it takes perseverance, and you can't always take the holiday when you want to. And yet we know that pushing yourself to the point of burning out, um, is a worse choice. Now, let me go back to the way you asked the question,
Yeah.
because I hear these words all the time. I would say I hear them in 100% of talks I give. And the phrase that people use is the phrase you used: how do I get them to? Because that's so deep in our thinking. I'm sure I've used that phrase myself many times. How do I get them to this? How do I get my client or my supplier or my employee or my grandkids? How do I get them to? But I've learned the hard way that you really can't get people to do anything, really. That's pretty reliable advice. So for me, the question is, how can you, yeah, how can you enable them or remove the obstacles to them doing what they're trying to do? And I'm not just picking on words. I think it's a fundamental thing about whether it comes back to radical engagement. Are you trying to get them to do what you want them to do, or are you trying to engage with them such that they will see, okay, I got a situation here. How can I deal with it? Can we work together? I think that's the fundamental point.
Yeah, and I think it's a very well made point. You happen to be talking to somebody who really does believe that words matter a lot, and so I appreciate that. I just took a note on that. It's. I think it starts there because again, the whole idea is I want them to implement. I believe in what I'm teaching them. And so if I didn't, I'd say good luck and maybe you will. I know this will be a great change, but I also know the instinct on the other side. So I'm going to watch those words, and I appreciate that. Thank you, truly.
Well, let me tell you where I got that because it's an interesting story, and I think it'll it's it's not a recipe, but it's a riddle I think worth pondering. So I did this workshop in 2017 in Colombia just after the Civil War, uh, a peacemaking workshop, and there were politicians and CEOs and farmer leaders and philanthropists. And there was one guy there who I'd met before. He's well known in Colombia. He just is named Francisco de Rue. He's a Jesuit priest, a very amazing guy, a real peacemaker, done courageous things. And he just the week before been appointed the head of the Truth Commission in Colombia to look look into what had happened in the 52-year war that had just ended. So I was kind of surprised he, in his first week of this new job, was at this workshop. And he said, "Yeah, well, I'm kind of curious to see how you do things. Might help me in my job." So anyhow, it was a good workshop. It was going well. People were managing to find a way forward. And he comes running up to me. He's a very energetic, excitable guy. After the first day, he says, "Adam, I see what you're doing." I said, well, Francisco, what am I doing? And then he says a really Jesuit thing to me. He says, "Adam, you're removing the obstacles to the expression of the mystery." So I spent the whole evening with him, none the wiser. I don't understand what he meant. Mystery, it's not like a Agatha Christie mystery. It's when a Jesuit says mystery, they mean something unknowable. But here's what I took away. The key thing is removing the obstacles. That's the clue. If you can focus your attention on removing obstacles to people expressing their, I guess you could say their most important nature, their most important drives, then you're onto something. And that's where I learned that it's not about getting people to, it's about removing the obstacles preventing them from to.
Well said. And I will tell you from the world of sales training, and I'm going to say it. Usually, our biggest obstacle are the sales managers. The sales
Really?
force, when we go in, we're always told, "Oh, these salespeople, they're not going to want to change." Salespeople,
Hmm.
they're salespeople. They're very easy. I'm not saying they're easy to sell, but you sell salespeople. And salespeople,
Right.
I know as a salesman and a sales trainer, I'm very easy to sell. If it makes sense, I want the idea. It's the sales managers that typically will kind of inadvertently get in the way because this is changing things for them too, and they have a
And
set
how,
way of doing
what's
it.
the way they get in the way? I'm curious. How do they?
Well, yeah, they'll get focused on not, a lot of times when we create change, when we teach a sales force a different way of doing business, it's like learning a kick serve in tennis. It's a great serve. If you want to play at a high level, you better learn it. But when you learn it, you're going to take a step backwards before you take a step
Mhm.
forward. And then your plane of
Right,
improvement continues to it's out there for you. So sales managers sometimes it creates changes in their process. They're a little
mm,
concerned in terms of I don't want to see anybody take a step back,
right, right,
and so that they'll. On one other thing, Adam, and the way we get around it is a lot of times traditionally they don't go through the training that the sales team goes through,
right,
or if they
right,
do,
right. They
they're
think I know
observing,
already.
right? Where they're
Yeah,
observing.
I'm a manager. I must know already.
Right. So they never really go through the discomfort that, if it's a good program, we want those salespeople to make instinctive moves and then show them maybe that's not the best move. We want them to discover it. You
Right.
can't do that with your laptop open, your cell phone on, you're
Yeah,
answering
yeah,
emails and being off that U-shaped room. Now, there's ways
yeah,
around it, but I'm saying,
yeah.
ironically, they bring me in and they become my most difficult impediment to change. That's
Well, and I think another way to say it, I mean, one part of what you've said that resonates for me is I think the hardest thing about this work these days is people don't pay attention. when you said they're on their laptops, they're on their cell phones. And if you're not paying attention, there's not a lot you can do that's useful or creative or human. And so getting people to pay attention, here it is. I've said getting people to, but helping people pay attention, that's a big part of this.
Empowering them, is that what you meant, Adam? Empowering these
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
But you're right. You're right. And now I happen to believe that's where a great sales trainer comes, or a great professional speaker comes into play. We are methodical about kind of just like the way we would sell the product. We don't go out there and pitch a change. What we do is we create trust in that room and we move from there.
Mm,
But
mm.
it's interesting. That's and I'm speaking for all the trainers and speakers out there. The good ones are worth their weight in gold because, and don't quote me on this, although now I'm putting it out on a podcast, but quietly I've always believed take bad curriculum, put it in a good professional speaker's hands, and they'll make it good. Take good
Mm,
curriculum, put it in a
mm.
bad speaker's hands, they'll make it bad. The
Yeah.
curriculum, it's who's delivering that message. It becomes
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. How about a shout out to a mentor or two, and we'll wrap it up here. Is there a mentor? I've already heard. What was it, Bill? Tom-
Well, I will give a shout out to Bill O'Brien, of
yeah,
blessed memory.
yeah,
Uh, but I think one of the reasons I was lucky when I met him is he was already in his final years. He was ill and would die a few years later. So he wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't competing with me in any way. He genuinely wanted to help me reach my potential. We had a very directive CEO of our company who left at a certain point, and Bill's only comment was, when the big tree falls, the smaller trees get some sunlight and grow. So he used to say that that what was most important in a leader or a manager was the intent, and going back to the word you use, the intent to help people, I don't remember how he put it, but to help people grow and become who they really could be. And I found that inspiring. Stayed
yeah,
with me, 25 years later.
yeah. Well, that is inspiring. And again, you heard little ticking noises. I happen to really like that quote as well. Um, because we don't think about it. That there's that instinct again, right? But logic states, yeah, it gives opportunities. And I'm looking out my window as I speak to you, and broke my heart about 5, 6 years ago. We had a big oak tree over 100 years old. Imagine the size of this
Mm,
thing, 60
wow.
tons, 60 tons.
Wow.
And I had to have it get cut down because, as somebody told us, the guy said, if this goes down and was aiming at our neighbor's house, it'll end up in the basement. It'll go right through that
Yeah.
house.
Wow.
But 6 years later, you can't imagine what's thriving out there that was underneath this big oak tree. It
Oh,
breaks my heart that we lost it, but in fact, the rest of the yard seems to be thriving. So that
as in
really
other
connected.
oaks or
Yeah,
other
we did.
oaks
Yes, we
or
did. Yes, we did plant another oak,
yeah.
amongst other things.
Yeah.
So
Great.
anyway, listen, absolute pleasure. How do people get a hold of you?
Adamcahan.com would be a good start. That'll
Okay.
bring you
And
to where I am.
okay.
LinkedIn, Adam Cahan.
Good. And just in case you need a little help on that spelling, folks, it's Kahane. Just as it sounds. And it actually, when I asked Adam to pronounce, I went, that is how it looks. So, good job on that naming. Anyway, listen, been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. Thanks for he's coming to us from South Africa today, so we've got him at the end of the day, but he looks fresh as a daisy. And welcome to the Barrett Kohler family. He's a Barrett Kohler author. He was there before I was, but I hadn't met you before, so it's just nice to have you in the family. And thanks so much for being on the show. Really, really grateful.
My pleasure, Rob.
Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.